Jeffrey, you've been working on this for a lot of years. You've spoken, you've written books, you've written documentaries. Ocean, your dad and you've been on the front line for a long time. Dr. Cousens, you've been speaking about this for many years, treating people. You're not actually presenting brand new information tonight. You speak beautifully. Jeffrey, I've seen you on TV shows. You're on the doctors. So what's happening? I mean, what's happened when you speak to the senators, the congressmen, the president, anyone? Does anyone listen? Are they just ignoring it? Do they, why? Other people must have heard your information, seen your movies, read your books. So why hasn't someone said, okay, now that I know the information, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to write a law, I'm going to change things? Why hasn't this been solved already? What's preventing the information that you beautifully write and read and articulate from getting into the hands of people who say, we got to stop this, we care about the people?
Well, the status quo is profitable to the folks who are profiting from the status quo. And so there's not a lot of motivation to make change on behalf of the industries that are doing quite well financially in a society that has made money more important than human life or the survival of our planet itself. And that's the economic system we have created as human beings, is a system that values money over all else. And life and death are maybe factors on a PR portfolio or a balance sheet, but at the end of the day, it comes down to money. Now, I think money is value neutral, but absent ethics and integrity, it can become a source of real destruction because it makes a decent servant, but a terrible master. And I think that we have, for example, a food industry. The way I look at it is food 1.0 is about survival. If you can get enough calories to fill your belly, then that's success. Food 2.0 is about commerce. The central organizing principle is the buying and selling of goods. My grandpa came up with 31 flavors of ice cream. In Food 2.0, that's genius. Went from vanilla chocolate and strawberry to Rocky Road and Jamocha almond fudge and all the rest. But unfortunately, Food 2.0 is morally bankrupt, which is why I'm saying we need Food 3.0, which is health. And in my picture, there are plenty of healthy profits in Food 3.0. They just come from healthy food because we make health for our bodies and our planet the central organizing principle of our food system. However, getting Nestle and McDonald's and Coca-Cola on board with that type of direction is a little tricky. And when I was meeting with a lot of food industry leaders, one of my core points was, you all are actually just out to make money for your shareholders selling food. You don't actually have a stake in Monsanto or biotechnology. You don't have a stake in pesticides. You don't have a stake in refined products. You would happily make money selling healthy food, right? And they were like, yeah, sure, absolutely, wherever the profit is, you know? And in fact, we would rather make money selling healthier food. And we're trying, they would say, you know? Coke came out with Diet Coke. So, you know, but I think that there is something about the large-scale industries that are so focused on delivering flavor and bottom possible price and lowest possible production costs that quality and health impact somehow get really short-shrifted in the equation. And then we've got a medical industry that acts like food didn't matter. The average physician gets 19 hours of nutritional education in all of medical school, and most of that focuses on the symptoms of specific nutrient deficiencies. It doesn't actually focus on what to eat. There are only, out of 150 medical schools in America, there are only 4 that have a single faculty staff member with a focus on nutrition. So it's really treated like a tiny, tiny, tiny little side note. And 19% of our GDP is going to disease symptom management. There's a lot more money in that, quite frankly, than there is in health. From a medical standpoint, I have a feeling that if broccoli was reimbursed like chemotherapy is, we would see more broccoli eaten and we would see less cancer deaths. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. So we are up against some established interests and some entrenched interests that are profiting from a status quo. And unfortunately, our government is more accountable to donors than to voters, or certainly than to public welfare. And so as long as the money is in the hands of established interests, it's going to be tough to create change from the establishment level. However, that doesn't mean we can't change what we eat, what we buy, and build a new food economy. And that's one of the things that is heartening to me. And even in the GMO struggle, Jeffrey and I worked together on a lot of ballot initiatives for GMO labeling in a series of states. And while the biotechnology industry typically out-fundraised and outspent us by about 5-1, I will say that 1 was a lot better than 0, and it predominantly came from the natural food sector that was passionate about this issue and that is growing in influence and even in political clout. So I think we are building a new economy, actually, and that every dollar we spend invests in a direction monetarily that either fuels more of the same or something different. And I choose to invest my energy, my attention, my time, and my financial resources in every way possible in creating something healthier and better.
Very nice. I really like that. I have an opportunity to speak in many places around the world, and I couldn't help but notice in Argentina where people living in the area where they're doing GMO with the glyphosate kind of spraying, that they have 100 times more miscarriages and 5 times more incidents of congenital defects. Couldn't help but notice that, as well as infertility. What I also couldn't help notice is the doctors were really upset and actually did a march and were really protesting. So I think that's interesting. I don't know if you heard about that, but that's an area I work in. So what I'm saying is, around the world, there is somewhat of a movement, which is good. There's something like 64 countries that actually have labeling of GMO, okay? And 38 countries where they're outlawed. I think that's really important. You can't do GMO in Russia, for example. Can't do it. It's illegal. So there is hope here on a world scale. Now, who are the top producers? The United States and Brazil, then Argentina, then Canada. So we are in a sense the belly of the beast, so it is harder, but it's good to see the bigger picture, that there are really concerned people, really upset people, including doctors, who just, you don't need to have a nutrition course to figure out what's going on. And so there's really good news about it in the bigger picture. So there are, around the world, a force that really cares about the people from the medical point of view and really political point of view. So I just want to give that kind of note. And it's growing. We will defeat it. It's really against humanity. There's a statement in the Bible, the Torah, Genesis 1:12, which says something, it speaks directly to it actually. It says the vegetables and the grasses of the field and the fruits of the seed-bearing tree are to be made, this is Genesis 1:12, to be alike. In other words, they're not supposed to, the DNA is not supposed to be altered, is what it says. Okay, in same kind. So there's a deeper issue going on a spiritual level of we are not supposed to alter the DNA of God's creation. I'll put it as simple as that. Look it up, Genesis 1, verse sheet 1:12. So, it's in kind is what it says. So that's a key spiritual component that eventually will overwhelm the economic, the short term, because it is short term, the economic things of creating good food so people can be healthy with healthy minds and healthy bodies. So kind of the bigger picture, but understand the spiritual aspect of it. You're not supposed to change the DNA. It's hate to say it, but what it is, it's satanic, literally. Those who want to change the DNA are violating the whole divine plan. So there are huge spiritual forces going on to understand this on a deeper level. So, no, this will happen. We have to play our role. We have to make enough noise on our part, which is what you're saying, and create enough good food to make a difference. So another little piece is how to talk about food. And they play a lot of games with labeling. So we've created a term called authentic food. What is that? Food that is grown locally within 3 days, because everything else, food loses its energy. Give it 3 days, it's going to lose its energy. And it has to be organic, but also not transported, not bumped around, and, in trucks and so forth. So that is a way of thinking about it, growing locally. The minute we grow locally, farmers make more money selling healthy food. So if we can get to the local farmers, you're going to make more money. Go organic, you're going to produce more, because the GMO promise didn't happen. We're going to make more food for more people. It's not true. This GMO is maybe equal to or 10% less in terms of productivity. So if we, like you were saying here, put our money where literally our mouth is and buy authentic organic food, locally grown, we start to move away from the bigger food industries, which I think is a very key concept here. Supporting the local agriculture. So that's just another insight. And supporting the spiritual insight into this. This is really, get it, we're not supposed to change the DNA. That's not our job. That's against the divine plan. GMOs are against the divine plan. So just an added way of thinking about it. Very good. Very good.
So, Stephen, the way you frame the question, it's almost as if, in my mind, you gave too much power to the policymakers. You said, I have talked to members of Congress and Senate and head of state and ministers and all over the world. And I can tell you that what has driven more than those meetings, even though many of the people that I spoke with are in complete agreement, is the change in the purchasing power. It's the actual and perceived change. When Arpad Pusztai, a top scientist in his field, when he was ungagged by his boss and could finally talk about the health dangers of GMOs, it was picked up by the European press. Over 700 articles were written within a month in the UK. There was so much agitation in the European press about GMOs that 10 weeks after the gag order was lifted, on April 27th, 1999, Unilever said no more GMOs in Europe. The next day, Nestle said no more GMOs in Europe. And then the next day, and the next day, and the next day, the rest of the giants crumbled for Europe. Because that whole episode that was the basis for hundreds of articles was not covered at all in the United States press. And the same companies that took GMOs out of Europe continued to sell GMOs to unsuspecting Americans. So we educated Americans directly through so many channels, and people did not need to get their messaging from the muted mainstream press. We got to them. And now 46% of Americans seek non-GMO food, according to the survey. And that's more than we need to start the tipping point in the United States. It is underway. The food companies realize they cannot withstand a competitor with a non-GMO claim on the same shelf as their brand without it. And so brand after brand after brand is becoming non-GMO. So do I want to try and change the FDA policy as the way I spend my time, knowing that it was Monsanto's former attorney and later vice president who was put in a position to be in charge of FDA policy and came up with a GMO policy saying, don't ask, don't tell. You don't have to submit it for evaluation. You can decide whether it's safe, and we won't have to label it. Or the EPA that allowed the glyphosate, the active ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup, to pass with flying colors, and we find out now, because of the documents made public because of the lawsuit, they had a lapdog in the EPA who was working on their behalf in charge of the cancer committee. And he even said, if I can stop this other agency's evaluation of carcinogenicity of glyphosate, I deserve a medal. He said that to his Monsanto handler. And we have the email from one Monsanto man to the other talking about praising Jess Rowland of the EPA. Do I want to go after the mainstream media, knowing that they have been biased? Do I want to go after top academia that has been a major focus of Monsanto's disinformation campaign? Or the farmers who get most of their information from the seed companies, the chemical companies, the biotech industry? They're all the same thing. And the land-grant universities and the agents that do the bidding for the biotech industry. Do I want to go after them? Monsanto's stronghold. Monsanto, now Bayer. That's not where the power lies. The power lies in a mother protecting her children. And the way to motivate that power is with the truth. So in this movie, Secret Ingredients, we'll show it to a room full of people at a festival or a premiere, and virtually everyone in the audience wants to change their diet to be more organic, and they want to tell their friends who they think are suffering from a disease related to GMOs and Roundup after they've gotten the truth. So, Stephen, the answer is we are actually winning in the GMO battle, and we can win even if we don't change government policy.